everybody, it's Frankie-Lou. I'm coming to you today from the wonderful greenhouse in the sky here in Golden, BC, where I want to talk to you today about one of my most favorite growing techniques, which is vertical growing. I'm going to do a little bit of training today for this wonderful beast that I'm growing here. I thought this was the perfect opportunity to discuss not only the benefits of vertical growing, but also some strategies, because it does take a little bit of training. Obviously this guy's doing pretty good on his own, but I do find that every few days or so I do like to do a little bit of training, sort of helping the process along so that this wonderful, magnificent plant will produce as much as possible. So this really isn't that hard to do, because for some plants, particularly vining cucumbers and squash, they really want to do this on their own. I'll give you some close-ups later of some of the tendrils, and that's what those are for, to cling on and climb up. So by doing this vertical growing technique, we're just really helping the plant to do what it really wants to do. You don't need to buy a whole bunch of fancy equipment to do this. There are some tools that you can purchase, or you probably have a lot of this around the place already that assists with this sort of thing. Stakes are wonderful, and this can be made out of almost any material. Sometimes I find hooks are helpful for before a plant is ready to be fully wrapped around something. Sometimes it might need a little hook to hold it in place. But the number one tool are ties. Now, you could go out and buy a whole bunch of expensive ties at a garden store, or you could do like I do. And honestly, I find these are my best ties. I just save socks that have holes in them throughout the year, and I cut them up into these strips. These sock ties are wonderful because they have some give, so they're not going to strangle your plant or cause damage to the stems, and they can be rewashed and reused several times by putting them in a mesh bag and throwing them in the wash, and I don't have to pay anything for them. I'm upcycling something that would otherwise be thrown away. This is one of the main reasons that I like the vertical growth, because if you see the size of this plant here, if I had allowed this to just grow down in this garden bed, it would take over most of this garden bed. I've got chives and marigolds and dill and lettuce and nasturtiums and all these wonderful things which are acting as companion plants, including some beans and peas in there too. And there's even sunflowers growing behind this. There's no way any of that could be here if I hadn't created this vertical growth pattern for this plant, because as you can see, it's enormous and it would take over a whole bed. Now it takes up this much space versus a 12-foot bed. So that's kind of a no-brainer. That's one of the main reasons. And right on cue, one of my pollinator friends has shown up to help me explain another major reason for doing this. By lifting this plant up off the ground and having the flowers at different levels, there's a much higher chance that this is going to be pollinated by the beneficial insects that are running around in here. And we have tons. This has been a very effective greenhouse for attracting pollinators because it is so large, and we have big garage doors on either side so they can come and go as they please. I even get birds in here, so it's wonderful. But this butterfly is going to have a much easier time. He's flying up high. The butterflies aren't usually flying down that low. This butterfly is going to have a much easier time finding the flowers on this vertically growing squash. This is a spaghetti squash that's growing here. I probably have about 10 fruiting bodies on here right now that have been pollinated. There's some that got missed and they'll just drop off, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with the protection I'm seeing out of this. So that's a reason. What we have done here is we have created a very strong base. When you are working with things like squash, I'll show you some of the fruits we have on some of the other ones. This is not going to be held up by something flimsy. We have got a nice we've got some fencing material here that we've repurposed from another area on the homestead, and we've wrapped it around a really good brace. Creating a strong framing brace is important. This is another reason I really enjoy raised beds, because you can fix bracing onto a raised bed a lot. That's going to be firmly in place rather than having something that you're trying to drive into the ground and may wiggle around. You can screw a framing brace onto a raised bed, and that assists with your vertical growth patterns that you want to do. You can create a nice cage around your raised bed. We've done that with metal, but wood would work as well, if that's what you have. We repurposed some things we found, which is what the story is for most of the things in this greenhouse. We tried to repurpose as much as possible, and we're using this strong framing because these spaghetti squash fruit can get huge, and if I got 6 growing on here, you can imagine the weight that this can create. So yes, using strong materials to hold up the base as the structure is going to be really, really important. Another reason I like this vertical growth, the stuff isn't sitting on the ground, and I find that it reduces the amount of powdery mildew that I develop in my squash and my cukes, because there is so much airflow going through here. And if powdery mildew does start to develop, I can find it really easily and nip it in the bud. I do prune. I don't prune aggressively, but I do prune. When it comes to plants like this, if I start noticing some powdery mildew developing on it, I will remove 1 or 2 leaves at a time. I don't want to do more than that because it is damaging to the plants, and you do want to have a lot of leaf because that is where the photosynthesis is occurring and feeding the fruit of your plant. So don't overdo it because A, it stresses the plant. I'm not gonna lie, when you take off a squash leaf, you see the amount of fluid that comes out of there. You can't say it's not stressing your plant, so you do want to minimize that. But I do find that I take maybe 1 or 2 leaves off of this a week, and that's keeping it nice and healthy. It's allowing for more airflow, and I've got all my pollination happening, and I'm not allowing too much moisture to develop on the plant itself. That's another reason I like the vertical growing. I am keeping these leaves completely dry. It is so much easier to just water the base of this plant by putting the hose in there and leaving it for a few minutes, rather than trying to get in there and spray it. Where is the base? Some of these plants, when they get so big, it's hard to find them if they're just planted flat in a garden bed and allowed to sprawl all over the place, and it's hard not to get these leaves wet. These leaves don't get wet, just the base does, and that really helps to reduce my powdery mildew as well. So I'm gonna get up on this ladder. I'm afraid of heights, but for some reason when I'm doing this, I get so absorbed it doesn't bother me. And I'm just gonna show you, like if I were to pull off all of these branches that have been trained to go upward, this branch would be this wide. Well, this plant would be this wide, but I'm finding that I'm able to keep it pretty contained by doing this little bit of training. I am only here for a couple of days a week. I actually have a whole other life in Alberta as well. So I have to make sure that when I am here, I am able to do these little bits of maintenance. It's really important to keep it up, especially at the start of a season. This has only been planted, this was planted as a seedling on May 8th. So it's really, this huge plant has only been going for 7 or 8 weeks. So it's still in the early phases of care. As it's been trained along, you'll find that these things do take care of themselves. So I'm going to get up here and show you a few of the training techniques. Got my handy dandy sock ties if I need them. I gotta go higher. Okay, so over here I can see this one starting to come up. I'm just going to tuck that in there. I'm going to do the same over here. I tend to use these tendrils that the plants produces, and just so that you know what I'm talking about, I'm going to bring you in to show you a close-up of the tendrils right now. Here we go. Here are some of those wonderful tendrils that squash and cukes do produce. You can't tell me that those were not created to cling on to things. They're beautiful as well, and I can often get absorbed just looking at the beauty of these plants. But by creating that vertical trellising, you're giving these plants an opportunity to use those tendrils in the way that they were designed. Ain't that pretty little one? Okay, as you can see, those are meant to cling on to things. And so you want to use that. You want to use those tendrils to help you with your plant clinging on to things. I'm going to, if I find that it's starting to go a little crazy, I just start tucking the leaves into each other. And it looks like I'm going to have to move my ladder to get over here and show you. Because this thing has literally grown. When I was training this yesterday, I had the ladder there. It's already, like, I'm not joking, this thing has grown almost a foot. They're really happy with this, okay? So I'm going to tuck this one here under, and it'll start wrapping. Oh my goodness, I have to go even further. Okay, and now this one, I'm gonna wrap around, and I'm gonna use one of my handy dandy sock ties to assist me. Like I said, if you haven't done this yet, it's a game changer. I use the sock ties for tomatoes as well, and I have whole videos about that. Okay. I'm just gonna do this loosely because it doesn't require it to be too strong. It will want to wrap on its own. That's the way these plants are designed. So just keeping up on that, making sure that these flowers are being exposed. While I'm up here, I will often check on the fruits. Sometimes, although like I said, the pollinators are doing a great job. If I see a male flower and a female flower, I'm gonna pick that male flower and pollinate while I'm up here. It's just a good time to do some basic maintenance. Now I'm going to take you over and show you some cucumbers, and another reason why the vertical growth is great. Okay, as you can see, we have cucumbers growing here in much the same pattern. Some of this leftover fencing strapped up. I've got cucumbers, nasturtiums in the front again, lettuce and herbs in front, and I also have a butternut squash coming up here. Okay, now these if you've grown cucumbers, you know that basically they are the masters of disguise. And you may think that, oh, I've picked all my cucumbers, and then suddenly you go out and you found a boat growing in your garden that wasn't there yesterday. With this vertical growth, see, it's harder for those cucumbers to hide. I got 1, 2, like tons of cucumbers that they're far more visible for me. I'm able to pick. And with these being indeterminate variety, I want to keep picking them so they keep producing them. Also, you can see that I've got some beans growing up here as well. Companion planting is easier when you have the ability to have these plants intertwine with one another and give them some support. So the vertical growing is great for beans and cucumbers and squash all growing together as well. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I hope that you'll give it a try. I just wanted to show off my big baby here. This plant, it's even bigger. I keep expecting it to call me Seymour and ask me to feed it. It's just going crazy. And as you can see, squash is developing really nicely out here. Believe it or not, this is not ready to pick yet. It's so big, but I can still mark it with my fingernails, so the rind hasn't hardened up yet. I'm not going to quite pull this one yet. But there's this one developing and about another 6 other ones as well. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you'll try this. As always, if you have any questions, please do let me know. I love answering your questions. And I hope you'll stay tuned to see more developing here in the greenhouse in the sky. This is my version of heaven, and I'm so fortunate to be able to grow in here. And I love sharing the things that we're learning here in this greenhouse. Thanks for joining me, and as always, I hope to take this chance to grow together today. Have a good one.